I was wrong about Nushell because it's not really a shell. How can I put it better? Here's someone from Reddit helping out. Nushell is a powerful data processing environment that also happens to be a shell. And that's why I was wrong. I think it's a great shell, don't get me wrong, but it's far, far beyond just that. Let me rewind a little bit. I was happily using ZSH. It was great and all, but it was just a default and I never questioned it. So I started exploring Fish, which led me to my previous video right here. But then the comments in that video left no doubt. I had to test Nushell. And what do you know? I did, and it's still with me today. But the more I explore it, the more I find things that get me excited on one hand and worried on the other. You'd think picking a shell would be straightforward, but even shells, shells can be fertile ground for heated arguments on the internet. Gotta love the internet. So here's a couple Mr. Miyagi tips before we jump in. Take everything with a grain of salt and don't trust your life or your working environment with unstable versions of software. Exploring Nushell, I found amazing capabilities, but also some extremely frustrated users. The tool is so powerful that it quickly became apparent I couldn't just move on to the next thing without going deeper. And despite its drawbacks, and yes, there are quite a few, if you're curious, stick till the end, I think there's something very special here that's different than any other shell I've ever tested. There was one thing with Nushell that was so tiny but yet so annoying to me, I was about to ditch the thing just because of that. Remember the children's story of the princess and the cooked pea grain where she couldn't sleep even though it was under 10 mattresses? Well, Nushell, while letting me extract data and manipulate databases, wouldn't let me delete a single word. The alt backspace feature I love so much. If you want to know why, check the video above. But in Nushell, this thing won't work and it drove me nuts. So I added a bit to config new, where alt backspace are remapped to the same action within the shell. Not something I ever had to deal with, but it works, so I'm happy. Now here's something I took time to figure out. Nushell is very easy with JSON and YAML, but it can also detect columns for you. For someone who works with Kubernetes and kubectl a lot, this is super nice to have, and even though I can extract data in many other ways, other APIs are less friendly, making this feature sometimes a lifesaver. Let's see it in action. I'll get pods from the cluster, which are returned as table with columns. Piping it to detect columns works flawlessly. I now have a new recognized table that I can play with. Let's pick only pods where the age is 27 days, and as I've shown in the previous video, the Rust style error that comes out of this is super helpful by asking whether I meant age in capital letters, because that's how it was parsed. Pop over to the terminal mode and using escape. By the way, if or when you hear of a solution to Nushell's readline option to remap escape to something like JJ, please do let me know, because right now this is the P under my princess bed. With the right parameters, the data is now filtered. Awesome. Like I said, with kubectl, I can decide I want a JSON output and then pipe the result, parsing it with from JSON. And this becomes structured data that we can start querying with Nu. I can get the kind, I can get the status object, and even read nested values like status.hostip. If this doesn't scream JQ to you, well, it should. Nushell replaces JQ altogether, and there is an entire documentation section dedicated to the comparison of syntax and how to move between JQ and Nushell. If you aren't aware yet, Nu doesn't care what type of data you're getting. I can take a YAML instead, then parse it using the toYAML operator. I can then convert it to JSON again, and it works like charm. Nushell can go back and forth, another set of tools saved right there. Make it a structured JSON again and convert it to another YAML like it's nothing. But here's where it gets super interesting to me. I mentioned the need to dig into objects sometimes, changing my queries or just reading them conveniently by going up and down the tree structure. Instead of writing many queries, Nushell offers the explore command. This opens a pager with a structure where you can navigate in and out of objects, traverse the tree, find values, and basically comb through a complicated structure in a convenient, human-friendly way. Up until today, I'd export objects as JSON, send them over to JQP, which was amazing because it offered a dynamic JQ query that I can change and see the results immediately. Nu makes it even easier. Just start exploring by moving around, no need for any syntax at all. When getting the entire output as JSON and sending it to Nu's from JSON operator, I can start digging in with additional options. One option is to take the collapsed structure and send it to flatten, where if we zoom out, draws every object with nested keys that's simple to read and query from. I can go on and run a select operation to basically run a SQL operation, picking only the data that interests me in the results, including the timestamp that I can then play with and use to filter yet again. I'll start by picking the first 5 to shorten the list, and then I can sort by creation timestamp and even reverse it so that it's easier to follow the pod's life cycle. If you're a Kubernetes user and you can do that with your output without playing around with a bunch of tools, well then hats off. I sure can't, and Nushell makes it easy and accessible. It doesn't end there. Another operator is into, allowing for typecasting, where I'm going to change the creation timestamp to a datetime object. And catch this, relative human-readable timestamps that don't break your brain. There's a lot more to working with tables in the docs, but I think it's time to show you how Nu replaces some of the common tools you use every day, which again, break my understanding of what a shell is, because with these, Nu is starting to become a framework, or a super tool. I use sed quite frequently, especially when scripting things. Sometimes I'd throw it into NeoVim just to run the search and replace within it, because I can't recall the exact syntax and flags that seem to differ between Linux and macOS. If someone, by the way, can explain the genius move of not keeping the same flags with the macOS version of sed, I'm listening. Anyway, here's the Nushell version of that. Just give it some text, pipe it to str replace, and wait for it, the source and target of your replacement. No delimiters, no nonsense, just a sensible syntax that's easy to recall. If you need the complexity, it's there with ---- regex, just provide whatever crazy replacement you need. But when you don't, there's no chance on earth I'm forgetting this syntax. Obviously, this works great with files as well, using the open operator to read the contents as input, and then after replacement using the save operator. Many users think this is fluff or out of place, but easy syntax for common daily tasks to me are friction removals and need to be praised. May I remind you that Nushell works with all types of data. You know how you often need to query or make changes to a CSV, and then you find yourself fighting with a spreadsheet or some other tool? Well, here's a CSV of users and passwords. That's beautiful with BAT, but inside Nu it becomes a source of power. It's parsed and injected into a table. We can get rid of the passwords, for example, by defining a small internal function that takes rows as parameter and replaces it with an empty string. By now, this should scream awk in your face because yes, Nushell replaces almost every awk need you had. The options and games on data are endless. The same query language applies with every structure. This is how selecting certain columns works great with a CSV by selecting, for example, the username and the city. If I wanted awk to do the same, not only I'd never remember the exact syntax, but it would look something like this, awk-f with comma as delimiter and then printing column numbers wrapped in curly braces, then wrapped in quotes. I never miss an opportunity to fail an awk command. Feel free to tell me it's a skill issue and rightfully claiming that awk is everywhere and super powerful, which it is, but like it or not, Nu is smoother, nicer, and a better option for 80% of daily use cases. Ready to take Nushell's capabilities even further? Well, if you're not sold over awk, sed, JQ, YQ, YAML to JSON, or to CSV, or whatever direction between them you choose, well, how about Postman? Yeah, the famous HTTP requests manager. Let me show you. We can call HTTP bin directly, but I want to see the logs, so I'm going to run it within a local container. Starting with something simple, HTTP get. It's as simple as that. HTTP get and the endpoint. Yet again, a syntax you literally can't forget, sending back an already parsed structure of headers, URL, and the entire response ready for you to explore or query. I mean, isn't that a dream coming true for anyone building and testing a local server? Sure, you can have CURL, one of the best CLIs ever created, and yet, I won't be able to easily query and manipulate the results. I always forget syntax for post requests, for example, like this one right here. This thing can also delete, patch, put, and send every other known request types to help you test your servers or interact with other APIs. I think that's enough already for things to get me sold on Nu and keep exploring it further. How about those downsides? Remember the frustrated users I've mentioned in the beginning? Well, many of them have translated many of their scripts to Nu only to get hit again and again with breaking changes and pre-1.0 half-baked releases. Not only that, some were annoyed, and rightfully so, by operators changing frequently, deprecation of functions, and more. All that said, GNU is more mature now, and the heated frustration, while justified, had seemed to die down recently, and the overall sentiment is extremely positive. This makes a very compelling argument for GNU, and like I mentioned in the beginning, for now I'm keeping it as my daily driver, especially with my line of work. And while it's a great option, I still think that if you're new to this, the world of Bash and DSH, which are more fundamental and basic, especially if you're going to work with remote servers, are a must. So watch this next video right here where I explore these and Nushell, which is the relatively modern version of the two. And thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.